details, but what makes a man is testosterone, and the different ratio from what the women have. And it's been quite well studied, Journal of American Medicine Association, etc. And then they did studies, and they found that as the testosterone goes down, and this is the effects that you see on men, it's called aromatization. The testosterone heads south and starts making into estrogen. So the guy gets the gut, he gets the breasts, his prostate gets bigger, because the prostate will start acting like a breast gland. And that's the ratio that changes on men as we get older. Now women need testosterone. Now most men, we would maybe give 100 milligrams of testosterone, and on women we'd maybe go up, maybe our max is 10. We start out at 1 or 2 milligrams and see what happens. But women need it for tone, bladder control. There's a lot of different reasons beyond just everybody thinks about sex drive, but they're there for a reason, and it's an important reason. Now, this is Emory University, and they looked at how do you get ovarian cancer. And that's, again, this is estrogen dominance. Now, Gilda Radner went to 5 doctors. Nobody figured it out. It's a tough diagnosis. If you got a family history of ovarian cancer, you need to get the blood test, the CA-125, and I get an ultrasound and get that every 3 to 5 years or something, because it's a tough pickup. Ladies just get bloating, kind of vague abdominal pain. It's a tough pickup, and you got to know about it. But that, again, is low progesterone. Now, estriol has been studied. The bottom one, I think, is the most interesting, how it affects immune function. So the argument is that this was given to us for a reason. It is protective, and it affects immune function and T-cell regulation. So this is all for a reason. Now, the relative bad guys are estrone and estradiol. The worst of the two is estrone. And even in men, it starts breaking down in the prostate to estrone to get the guy to prostate cancer. So there are studies that show this breakdown in how we age, and we start heading more towards estrone and estradiol. We like to replace it back with estriol. Now, here's a study, a big study. Doctors really quote it, etc. And I think it's interesting that when they found the benefits of progesterone, natural progesterone, they were surprised that it made a difference. So it's the mindset that you're dealing with to say, well, it should have been progestin, that's synthetic. And it's like progestin is like the evil brother of progesterone. But the doctor who was doing the study said, boy, I'm really surprised how well progesterone works. Now, here's 2 years ago, July, was kind of the big study, and there's been, before 2 years ago, when Rudy and I give talks, we kind of hedge at, well, you know, it doesn't look too good for the naturals, but, you know, it's kind of heresy to be against it. And then July of 2002, the NIH study shut down. It was an 8-year study, shut down in 5 years because of what they were finding was going on. So this was a big event. Now, doctors still give out Premarin. They'll say, well, I'm just going to give you a little bit of it, or we're going to go just for a short period of time, or those type of things. And we're the other side of Premarin and Provera and Progestin. We're into the natural side. And when I was in practice, what reaffirmed this for me, I would get ladies who would come in, and they would say, I'm not myself. And, you know, regular ladies like you, and it was almost an out-of-body experience for them. And they had been to several doctors, and they had gotten Premarin, Prozac, a pat on the head, or you're not as bad as my wife. And just kind of dismissed, you know, and they're frustrated. And what I think is ladies are men aren't that intuitive, but ladies are intuitive, and they intuitively knew it was hormonal, and there's something going on. So that really kind of tipped it for me. But here's what happened 2 years ago when the study came out. Now, there's been subsequent things that come out later which showed that higher incidence of Alzheimer's with the regimen of Prempro, which was Premarin and Provera. Now, I put this up to put it in perspective. Breast cancer is a big event, but heart disease is much, much bigger. And in ladies, it's harder to diagnose. Ladies may get epigastric pain, they may get fatigue. All the studies are done on guys. Most of the symptoms are discussed on guys, crushing chest pain, holding their chest, diaphoretic, things like that. Ladies will come into the ER with subtle signs. I'm just not feeling good. I got a little heaviness, or I think it's gas, or I just don't feel good. I'm short of breath when I walk up steps or something like that. And the thing about it is if you're on the synthetics, you got a much more rapid course to heart attacks. But once you've had menopause, after 3 to 5 years, you equal the same risks as guys. So heart disease is a big issue, and another reason for the naturals versus the synthetics. Now, what I want to do is kind of give you an overview, but I don't want to paint it too rosy. This system is not, here's a pill and I'm going to see you in a year type of thing. This system is not, I'm going to slam you with a big dose that your body doesn't have the enzymes to take care of, and it's going to stay in your system 17 times longer than it should. This system is give you a low normal dose, you titrate it to your system because you're going to be different than the next lady. But the problem areas are if you have yeast, the yeast tends to eat up the hormones and it causes an imbalance. If you've got low thyroid, thyroid increases a protein that binds your sex hormones and they're not as active. If you've got autoimmune, this is a problem. This is like I was talking about the Sjogren's lady. It tends to throw everything off. So if things aren't working, we look at autoimmune. And last but not least is stress. And what happens is you get cortisol, and there's a concept called a sterol load, which is like kind of like you got a cup of black coffee, and these are your sex hormones. And if you're under a lot of stress, you got cortisol, which is say white cream poured in. Suddenly you got a cup of coffee that's all white, and all your hormones are flushed out, and cortisol is hitting all the receptor sites, so things aren't working. So if you're under a lot of stress, obviously if you're in Auschwitz, you're not thinking about sex, you look terrible, you're not menstruating. This is an inordinate stress. But in our society, there's a lot of us there who are under chronic stress, and this is cortisol. If somebody shot a gun off here, we'd have adrenaline and we'd run. But the chronic stress is, I'm worried about my kids, I'm not sure what my husband's up to, I got financial issues. This is the chronic stress of cortisol, which we see a lot of. And I'll have ladies who come in and say, my kids are tough, I got all these stresses at work, etc. But the difference is once we get their hormonal balance and what I call the underpinnings right, they'll say, it's still tough at work and my kids are still jerks, but I can handle it. I'm not crying, I'm not, I got it together type of thing. So I think that's the aspect of it so that you can keep yourself together. Now, because of 2 years ago, there are a lot of studies going on looking at natural hormones. The problem is the FDA, which is essentially pretty much pro-drug company, doesn't have a mandate to look at these or compare. But there are, like the University of Texas, different universities are starting to look at this, Vanderbilt, etc. Now, my argument, and the reason I want to give you this history, is it makes a good case for estriol, and it makes a good case for progesterone. The wild cards out there, when we test people, can be DHEA and testosterone. I'm sorry, the good cases for estriol and progesterone, and we'll find DHEA and we'll find testosterone. I find a lot of low DHEA with women with the autoimmune, fibromyalgia, joint aches, those type of things. And sometimes we give them an extra tube to really get it going because that's the way Stanford treats it. But it's not out there with a drug rep pushing DHEA or vitamin E or progesterone. That's just the way the system is. Now, what we wanted to do is Rudy and I to get kind of an integrative system. Instead of, when John Lee would come to town, he'd give a talk. the books would go out and people had no place to go. What we wanted to do is get a system that we would test. You can see us in consultation, get the compounding, have educated pharmacists, like where's Ken Mitchell and Rudy, to talk to women, to understand what's going on, to close the loop and make it an entire system.
The question was, how do we know what normal baselines are now? Okay? The truth is, we know somewhat what normal baselines are. If you look at what the AMA says, they say, and all of the doctors who decide, they're talking about anti-aging medicine, they all say, if this is what is normal range, we want to shoot for the top 1/3 of normal. Okay? And if you look at what the top 1/3 of normal is, it's where the people are when they're younger. The higher you go on the range scale, the further back in time you go with the range scale. The question was,